why you should let the free market be free. Oh, and everybody agrees. I love it.
I'm still mad because I wanted to ask him about his veteran status, because in his PTR he had over the face of the soldier, I don't know if that was him or not, he's African Nazi, and then he didn't cover up the name tag on the soldier's uniform. So I was, whenever somebody talks about vets and they have, a uniform in the PTR, I kind of quickly glance at it, and I was just kind of confused by his PTR, and I was going to drill him on that, but, you scared him away.
I don't think that was him, Bradley.
And I scared him away by asking him a question.
He was drowning.
He was probably dishonorably discharged.
I doubt he ever fucking joined. He looked flat-footed to me.
Can I ask a question since we seem to be in a lull of conversation?
Ask away.
Okay. I think in the past, 4 or 5 months, since closing down the border, the U.S. military has created a buffer zone area approved by the states that is then run and controlled and guarded by the military. And it's caused 0 issues and people coming over in that area. But then it's kind of smart because then they would fall under federal guidelines. I want to know if people would be okay with a buffer zone across all border states that would be protected by military and following the federal regulations instead of each state.
What do you think the benefit of that would be?
Well, there would be one system, so it's not of a catch and release. It would be under protect the border as far as any type of violence towards federal officials, because it would be federal land. And then they would be able to process illegals crossing over the exact same way that they do on other areas, to include like military bases. So on military bases, they use the U.S. State Department to vet.
So here's the problem that I would have with federal control of the state borders, is that you have to think about which administration is going to be in and how they would use these powers against you. So when you have, like, let's say a room full of the people that are on the stage today that probably realize the way that Texas is currently handling the border versus the way that, let's say, California is handling the border. Now, if you had Trump in office and you thought, oh, okay, we'll have the federal government, but the military, and now the federal government is responsible for the border. What happens when we go through these cycles and then you get, I don't know, let's say AOC becomes president in 7 years, right? Well, let's just say she is. Would you, with her as president, would you want the federal government controlling all borders?
Not all borders, no.
Yeah, so I think we got to be careful about that. I think that, for those that say that, I remember when Texas was doing their thing and protecting the border, the Biden administration wanted to go to war with the people in Texas. They'd play that game where they would cut down the fence, they'd rebuild the fence. They're playing that little cat and mouse game. And the federal government was in disagreement with how the state was doing it. And I remember people arguing, and I think rightfully so, that, hey, this is Texas's job to protect the border. However, in California, they have a different approach to it. They just kind of let anybody, any Tom, Dick, or Jose in the country that wants to come in. And so, if you could get a constitutional amendment that said that border security was going to be adhered to, and that you were going to take the executive power away from making decisions that could lead us back to Biden-like policies, then maybe I could be interested in that. But I look at what Biden did to the border, and I say that less government control at the federal level would be best.
You know, the reason I asked that, I had a dinner with my friend, and he is in the area. He's in the military, and they're actually using that buffer area to test out new equipment, different types of these trucks, stuff like that. We're just like, okay, that's a good way to do it. And then they're also testing out procurement projects for the military as far as new AI and observation. So it's pretty interesting. So we were talking about it, and I shared with him when I lived in Cuba, Guantanamo Bay, if a Cuban national would cross over or would get swept up by a Coast Guard, the protocol was they have to claim asylum. If they claim asylum, then they are held in an area that is not accessible by anyone else on the base, and they wait for the U.S. State Department representative to process their claim. They give them a certain time to process the claim, and if they feel like, okay, yes, then they are then put in a system that on a faith-based organizations, NGO, which will place that Cuban national that's claiming asylum into other countries. It's never guaranteed the U.S. Most of the time, what they do is they try to place them in other culturally assimilated countries, language-wise, that is close to Cuba. So it made me think of, okay, if there's this border, this buffer zone, just in that short span, it would then kind of regulate as far as, lower the propensity of violence on border patrol, people that are bordering it, and then it would go through a State Department, so which they could be actually vetted on not only on a U.S. scale, but then also shared with other countries to ensure that they're not actors and processing fake asylum claims. The problem is, and it's just catch and release. Oh, well, then you have to wait for your court date or whatever. And the courts are so backed up, and there aren't enough of them. And that's the reason why a lot of them are like, okay, well, I'm just waiting. To answer, Abby, what countries? I'm not sure what you're asking. I was talking about Cuba and Guantanamo Bay. But the countries that they would be placed into would be like South American countries. I don't know if that was what you were referring to after that. I don't, it feels like on the national security side, having them processed through State Department would be a better vetting system and actual CBP, because CBP does not, their databases don't speak to other databases, which causes for people to like kind of slip through them. There's a reason why there are thousands of from various countries on the other side of the ships. They drop them right before they cross. Yes, Abby, same language. So when we lived on Guantanamo Bay, the Cuban nationals that claimed asylum and then they were waiting to be placed, a lot of them went to Guatemala, and then also Guatemala, I think Guatemala and Panama. But those were based off of NGOs.
Right now, I think though, KK, I think, and I've said this prior to Trump taking office, and I had a lot of people on the left agreeing with me. The trickle-down approach seems to be working because if you actually look at the actions by the Trump administration that has kind of forced Mexico's hand for all of their pontification speeches and all of their morality speeches, Mexico is currently deporting massive amounts of immigrants and securing their southern border. And this is new. Usually they just funnel them through, and Mexico is not playing games with it. So it's actually fascinating to hear that approach is actually working. Kama's plan, I believe, was to provide economic zones and opportunities subsidized by U.S. taxpayers to give it to companies that make like T-shirts, like Colombia and Patagonia, as long as they put factories in these countries. And they said that'll help. That didn't really work. That was her big border secure idea, and that was just as dumb as anything else that she's ever stated on. So I think right now, I agree with Roger. I see your point, though. It would be nice if we could have a federal buffer that all presidents in the future would actually honor and adhere to. I think the U.S. government, under its federal system, would actually do a better job of catching those that we definitely don't want in the country, most particularly terrorists, and then being able to secure them and handling it at a federal level with a decreased cost to the state. But the same concern would arise with me is, what if you did get AOC? Oh, dear God, we'd all be flooding to Canada, I guess, because they have a secure border and they don't allow people in. So, I mean, it would just be a nightmare to give that kind of power to it.
Yeah, everyone should be deported and or shot and killed instead of deported. You know, execute them or just deport them. Clean up the country. It makes sense to you guys, right? Stupid asses. Stupid asses.
This is Goat's transgender profile.
Yeah, but you were excited. You were excited when I said kill them all or deport